coming at you with another video. Now this one is another book review. This is Lori Foster's book called Let Me Be the One. So this is the cover here. So again, as I said, it's by Lori Foster. It's called Let Me Be the One. Lori Foster, she's definitely one of my favorite authors. So here's the synopsis. She's more than the girl next door. She's the one who got away. When Callie McCallahan left Hoker, Kentucky, she thought it was for good. Her parents moved the family away to pursue financial success. Since then, she's had some bumps in the road. Most recently, the humiliation of a failed engagement. When she inherits her uncle's farm in her old neighborhood, it's the perfect do-over. With her social media skills, she'll attract a whole new following and restart her career. The only thing is, she knows nothing about farming. For Tanner, Callie was the one who got away. He crushed on her in high school, but she barely knew he existed. 10 years later, she's back, and now she lives next door. Tanner keeps his head down and focuses on his family's tree farm. But when he sees that Callie is in way over her head and looking pretty down to earth and happy, Tanner finds her impossible to ignore. When Callie stumbles through the woods and encounters her sexy chainsaw-wielding neighbor, Callie definitely notices Tanner. Could this be the do-over each of them didn't know they needed? Alright, so I just wanted to say this novel, I really enjoyed it. As a rule, Lori Foster's novels, they have a lot of romance. They also have a lot of action and a lot of ups and downs. And her books are usually always great. Now, just like usual, this one did not disappoint. So when it comes to Callie, she'd grown up in Hoker, and then of course she moved away and ended up going to college and working with her parents with a family business. And then of course her uncle Reggie, who she'd been close to, and of course unfortunately her mom and dad had ended up cutting Reggie off, or so she thought, but really her dad was still in touch with Reggie even though her mom didn't really know it. And he kept trying to give him money, but then really Reggie said, I don't want your money. I just want to spend time with you. I just want you. I like our relationship, but I don't need your money. But honestly, as I said, Callie's mom thought that Callie's dad had closed off the relationship long ago, but he hadn't. And Reggie and Callie's dad were always close growing up and everything. And so as well, Callie had been staying in touch with her uncle and had spent time with him. They enjoyed going to the movies together and just being around each other and going to have lunch together and that. And so fast forward a little bit, Callie's been living out of Hoker for a while, and she ends up finding out that her uncle has passed away. And she ends up getting the notification from the lawyer that she's inherited her uncle Reggie's farm. So she comes back to Hoker and checks out her future place that she's inherited, and she just wants to see what she's dealing with. And unfortunately, though, she doesn't know the first thing about what's going on about how to care for the land and everything. And also, she doesn't realize, at least when she comes to check out the place, that how much work it needed, and also too that she had animals to take care of on the farm where she's on the house that she's going to be taking over. So also, when she and her cousin Glory, who came with her to check things out, get lost in the woods while they're trying to find her. While they're trying to find their way back to her uncle's place, she ends up running into Tanner. Now, when Tanner hears Callie and Glory talking, and Glory is freaking out, worried that they might come across some guy with a chainsaw. What does Tanner have with him but a chainsaw? And he decides he's going to try to freak them out or see how they react to it. And so he revs the chainsaw, and then of course Glory ends up shrieking and running, but not Callie. Callie ends up coming, approaching him and saying, checking out the situation and seeing what's going on. And she comes right up to him and confronts him and says, hey, I'm looking for such and such place. I was trying to find it, but I don't know where it is. I've gotten lost. And then, of course, Tanner ends up telling her that she's actually on their land, but he could help show her where, like, how to get back to Reggie's. And so they end up trying to find Glory. And when they do get back to Reggie's place, it ends up that she realizes how bad things are. And now Tanner, as well, growing up, he didn't have things so good. And, he'd had a lot of things going against him. So, when he was young, his dad had been abusive in a lot of ways and had also been a really big drinker. And his mom had passed as well, or at least was out, had left the house and didn't want the responsibility of him. And so more or less, all intents and purposes, she wasn't around. And his dad, he wasn't really a great dad, so to speak. And given that Tanner's dad was always drunk and everything, this time actually he had driven Tanner back home while he was drunk, but then also he got Tanner home, but then he ended up going into a closet while his dad was still around drinking. And then there had been a guy that had been after Tanner's dad and was really angry, and the guy who came after him ended up shooting his dad. And so even though he drove drunk and he still got home safely, but then the guys who were after Tanner's dad ended up coming after him, right? So unfortunately, Tanner ended up being orphaned and alone, and he was only like 11 or 12 or 13 around there. He was young, right? But luckily, Addie, she ended up finding him and she took him in, and then she ended up with a pseudo family that she hadn't realized that she kind of needed or wanted, and they ended up being their own little family unit. And of course, they ended up coming together, and he ended up healing a bit, and he was so surprised at what was going on, and that he could actually deserve happiness with a family. And so time goes on a bit more. He ends up with a brother, so to speak, because Addie ends up taking in another boy and ends up adopting both of them. And they both have had both Cam, who ends up being Tanner's adopted brother, and Tanner, they've had a lot of ups and downs, and more downs than ups, and they've been a bit vulnerable due to that fact, and they didn't know if they could trust others. And so, as time goes on, though, they end up, being protective of each other, and they end up having a loving relationship, loving family with the three of them, Addie, Tanner, and Cam. And so of course, on the other hand, Callie was from an affluent family. Her parents almost owned every business in Hooker, Kentucky when they moved away, and they moved away for other opportunities and that kind of thing. However, fast forward a little bit, they've ended up losing a lot of their businesses that they had outside of Hooker, and they've almost gone bankrupt. And it wasn't necessarily just due to the lack of jobs, but it was more due to her parents' spending and everything, right? And how they were living above their means. Now, when it comes to Callie's family, they were trying so Callie ended up dating this guy that she met, and also too, so she got engaged to him, but she didn't really love him, and it's more or less just a relationship just of convenience. And so then when Callie ends up catching her fiance cheating, she ends up considering it a blessing. And so she's not really upset, because she realized she wasn't really feeling much for him, but she was just going along with it. And she thought maybe she wasn't meant to have hot and heavy, or she was just meant for just bland, vanilla relationships kind of thing. But when she meets Tanner again, and of course, Tanner was a year younger than her in school, and Callie didn't remember meeting Tanner in school. However, Tanner would never forget Callie, and he'd always had a big crush on her. So now the question is, now that Callie's back in town, will Callie give Tanner a chance? I guess you'll have to wait and see and check this book out. So honestly, though, I love the way this book was written, just like all Lori's other books. This is an amazing read, and there's honestly a bit of everything in it for you, like a bit of romance, a bit of spiciness, so to speak, and a bit of action, a bit of drama. It has it all. So if you like Lori Foster books, or if you're just looking for something new to read, I would highly suggest checking out this novel. If you've read this book before, let me know in the comments what you thought. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And sorry, I did want to mention, out of 5, I'd probably give this novel a solid 4 out of 5, or 8 out of 10, maybe an 8.5, 9 out of 10. Definitely, I would highly recommend this read. Again, whether you borrow it at the library, or, get it at your local bookstore, or if you thrift it, any of those ways, I would highly recommend checking it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care. Bye, guys.